Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Johnny Crawshaw. I'm the chair of this committee. On my right is Ange Bealby from Democratic Services, and to the right of Ange is Sandra Brannigan, who's the senior planning lawyer today. On my left is Gareth Arnold, who's the development manager, and to the left of Gareth is Eric Matthews, who's a senior planning officer. Down each side of the tables, you'll see the members of the committee. In terms of a bit of housekeeping, just before we get started, we're not expecting fire alarms. So if the fire alarm goes off, we'll adjourn the meeting and we'll escort the members of the public here out of the building. If I can just remind everybody to make sure you've got your mobile phones turned off or on silent. If I can also remind everybody when you're speaking today, we're using the microphones. The acoustics in this room aren't fantastic, and they're not fantastic for anybody watching online. So if you can please make sure you're speaking directly into the microphone and sort of project to the front and the back of the room as much as you can. That's very much appreciated. This today is a business meeting of the council that's held in public as opposed to a public meeting. So there are very defined points during the meeting when we accept public participation. And if I could just request that nobody seeks to speak to or send messages to members of the committee during the hearing outside of those specific defined points, please. If we do need to take an adjournment during the meeting, I'll give some notice of that. And again, just to remind everybody not to discuss the application if it's partway through during that adjournment. In terms of the individual applications and how we go through them, we've just got the one application on today's agenda. What I'll do in a few minutes' time is invite the officers, first of all, to talk through the plans that have been submitted, and then invite any members of the committee to just ask points of clarification over the plans in terms of just understanding exactly what the plans are. I'll then invite the officers to just talk us through the brief update that there is to the published report. And then we move to the public participation section where people who've registered in advance are able to come and address the committee. And we have 2 people registered in advance. And so I'll describe how that section will work when we get to it. Once we've done the public participation, there's then an opportunity for members to ask questions of officers on any parts of the report, the update, or anything that's been raised during public participation. We then move into debate, and then we consider the officer recommendation first. There is a recommendation on every report that we see, which we consider, and only if the officer recommendation isn't accepted by the committee do we think about any other alternative ways of addressing the application. So that's the way that we'll do the meeting today. I will try and keep us on track and make sure that everybody's clear as to which stage we're at as we go through the agenda. Onto the agenda itself then. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence, and I've not received any apologies, so we are a full committee today, which is nice to see. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Does anybody have anything they want to declare? Councillor Stewart.
Many years ago, before we became the only country in Europe to tax education, I went to St. Peter's.
And thank you for noting that. Are you just noting that for transparency or for any other? Just for transparency. Thank you. Councillor Burton.
Transparency. I went to Queen Anne's Grammar School.
Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 3 is the general remit public participation section. We don't have anybody registered under the general remit public participation. So I can take us on to agenda item 4, which is the plans list. And that begins at page 7 of the agenda pack today. And as I mentioned earlier, there's just the one application today, which is an application at St. Peter's School for the erection of an outdoor multi-use games area. So Gareth, if I can invite you to talk us through the plans, please.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, the application site for this proposal is St. Peter's School. It is for a multi-use games area surrounded by a 3-meter high fence. Just on the site plan. There we go. So this is the south eastern boundary of the site. There's a back lane, and then these are the terraced properties in North Parade, which back onto the one of the school's cricket pitches in this location. So the area of the multi-use games area, 37 meters by 24 meters. And an image of the proposed fence. This aerial photograph shows the extent of the school grounds. So the location of the proposed multi-use games area is in this location, where the pointer is, North Parade. The listed buildings in the school estate. These are non-listed buildings. And then the former Queen Anne School is also a grade 2 listed building. We don't consider that the proposal has an impact on the listed buildings or on the setting of the listed buildings. Site is within the conservation area. Conservation area follows the footpath that bisects the school grounds, and then follows what I assume is the course of a stream up towards the avenue. So these sports pitches, including the cricket pitch, are within the conservation area. We feel they have some significance in the conservation area because they're they provide the setting for those school buildings, and they provide the setting for this southern boundary of the Clifton conservation area as well. It's also in the site is also within the city centre area of archaeological importance. A close-up shows you the properties in North Lane, unlisted school and teaching buildings. This is an existing hard surfaced area, which is currently set out as cricket nets. Of note is this hedge along the boundary of the school site. This is the hedge from the back lane, so to the left of the rear boundary wall of North Parade properties. The hedge is variably 3 meters or so in height. There's also a slight there's a change in levels between the back lane and the level of the playing field adjacent. So the cricket nets, the area of the cricket nets, and the hard surfaced area. So the area we're looking at for the proposed mugger is this area of grass. You see the boundary hedge, and then the rear of the North Parade properties. This is included to show the separation to the boundary. So there's the boundary hedge. We've got the existing footpath, which is unchanged. This little landscape strip, as you will have seen on the site plan, that's proposed to be replicated. To help break up that view from the rear of those properties in North Parade, and give it a more of a landscape setting, particularly within the conservation area. And then a final shot is just a bit more of a panorama. See the listed buildings of the school up on the top of the slope. The grass cricket pitch, the cricket nets, the boundary hedge, North Parade properties. Any questions?
Okay, any questions from members? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. I think it mentions 10 metres between the boundary and the first house. I wonder whether you could sort of point that out and what that 10 metre refers to, please, in terms of whether it incorporates the back alley and the landscaping, or whether it's to that point.
So
Yes.
the measurement is, we just remeasured it at around 11 meters actually, but it's from this point. So it's the proposed multi-use games area fence to the boundary, the rear boundary wall of the North Parade properties. So that separation incorporates the back lane, the hedge, the footpath within the site, and then the landscaped area, and then a bit of a margin between the landscaped area and the fence itself.
So then there's the backyard as well on top of the 10 metres. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's the measurement to the
to the
back wall.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just as a point of clarity on that point, I don't believe we know for certain the buildings that come up to that back wall, whether they're occupied or not. I know that the substantive building is set back from the back wall, but I think the plans show that there are some buildings where there may be structures that come right up to that boundary, and we're not clear on whether they're occupied
Yeah.
structures or
So
otherwise.
this, how does that work? So virtually every property has a single story range which extends to the back lane. Some of them have, most of them have they only have windows. None of them have windows into the back lane. And those single story ranges, they have their windows and doors into their own yard. From walking down that back lane, I'd say that some of them are habitable. They've been converted into, habitable space from previously being the range of outbuildings that you'd normally expect in a terrace property.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fisher, I had you next.
Thank you. I can't find any reference to it. Is the proposal to include netting over the top of the mugger to stop balls flying out and into the periphery of the area?
I don't think so. No.
No. Right. Thank you for that.
Okay, are these supplementaries or are these substantive? In which case, I have Councillor Baxter next, and then Councillor Eyre and Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the height of the fence and the current trees that are sort of on the inside of the boundary.
Yeah.
How do they compare in size? And for what's proposed, how will they compare in size to how tall the fence is? Will the trees on the inside of the boundary be taller than the fence, basically? Thank you.
So the fence is shown as 3 meters in height. The hedge is around about, I'd say it's around about 3 meters, but it has variations. It's taller the further north you go, but it has some, there's some areas which would benefit from it being maintained perhaps a little better. Did you mean the new planting? We don't have details of the new planting. I think the drawing, the details with the application suggests they'll replicate or look to replicate what they've installed, what they've planted further to the south. So these these trees, which look fast growing, non-native, which we wouldn't perhaps normally seek to be provided. But they look like probably more like 6 to 8 meters in height. But yeah, you can see on that one, there are gaps between them. It's not a hedge, it's not planted as a hedge.
Okay, Councillor Burton, was that supplementary on this or substantive? Because I'll add you to the list if it's, yeah, I'll add you to the list. In which case, Councillor Eyre was next.
Thank you, Chair. Just seeking some clarity, because on the site plan on page 25, the area outlined in red looks considerably smaller than the diagrams that you're showing elsewhere. Just a rule of thumb, see, that's taking about half of the space that there is. The site plan shows probably about a third of the space, because on one of the other signs, it shows that the area is currently in use. So does this basically take up the entirety of the current grassed area, and in which case, what is happening to its current use? Does that make any sense whatsoever?
Yeah.
Because that basically looks as if it's going all the way down to where the existing cricket nets are.
Yeah, that's
It fills the entire space, but the red line map is nowhere near as big on page 25. Doesn't extend as far
No.
down as.
Well, this is generated for information purposes. So this isn't part of the planning application.
So
The drawing on the book on the screen is part of the planning application submission. So if members approved it, they'd be approving that.
So that leads to the second question. If you could pull up the photograph you had of the site as is now. Yeah, it's in use. So assuming all of that space there is no longer there, where is the existing use being re-provided?
Well, it doesn't.
You have 3 cricket covers which cannot be kept on the pitch. They will have to be wheeled off the pitch when a game is being played. So where are you wheeling those? And if you're continuing to use mobile nets, those mobile nets will need to be stored. So you've got basically got 3 mobile nets and 3 cricket covers. They need.
I'd say we wouldn't micromanage that to that level. They'll have to sort out where to put their cricket covers and their nets themselves. They have a significant land holding of open space, but there is grass. There is grass to the north here, so that's an underground attenuation tank. So I think you could probably just shuffle it all further north.
So I think that's possibly a question to ask the applicant in terms of what their expectation is going to be on that. And then if there's further queries that we have following their answer, we can come back to officers. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the single-storey annexes to the properties on North Parade, I don't know whether it's possible for officers to give an approximation as to the depth of the single-storey aspect, i.e. from the rear boundary wall to the rear multi-storey wall of the properties.
I'd say it's somewhere in the order of 4 to 5 meters. If we use that. If we use that measurement, there. And then corresponding to that, that's, yeah, more than 4,325 mil, but probably around about 5.
Thank you.
So I think we can then assume that the combined distance from the net at the edge of the, or the fence at the edge of the mugger to the first floor windows on the rear projections would be around about 15 meters, 15 to 16 meters.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to make clear as well to everybody, just both for people watching and for members, further to Councillor Ayre's point, just around the differences in the area. When you're looking at the map in your report packs, in terms of the plans, the area, what's being proposed, page 29 is the reference to the plan, and that's what you should refer to, as opposed to page 25, which is the indicative location. So just so that we're all clear on that. Councillor Burton, you're next.
There's two questions that are linked, and I'm not sure whether you can answer this. There's already the cricket pitch there, which is hard surface. This is going to be AstroTurf. So I wonder if there had been complaints about the cricket pitch being used prior to this that we know of.
We do. We consult, as you would have seen in the papers, we did consult our public protection colleagues.
Yeah.
They didn't make us aware of complaints from
And
the
that's,
use
yeah.
of their cricket nets.
And that's a very different surface to the AstroTurf, which would presumably not make as much noise as hitting. Yeah.
I think the type of ball, the type of racket, bat, that will be the more principal
Yes.
source of noise, I think, than the surface. That would be my
I think they're both
guess.
of an AstroTurf. It's not a smooth hard surface. My recollection, I might be
Right.
wrong. But I think probably different generation of pitches.
Yes. And do we know how long that's been there and then been in use at all?
Do you know how long it's been there? Don't guess.
2017.
No. Post 2017.
Okay.
Did you have a second question as well?
Yes, but I don't know if it's appropriate or not.
If it's on the plans, it's appropriate. If it's not on the plans, it's hold it till later.
Yeah, I'll hold it.
Yeah. Okay, doke. Okay, any further questions on the plans? No, I think we're all clear on what we're looking at then. So I'll just invite Eric to talk us through the update that there's been.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to add in additional policy clarification, specifically policy ED8, community access to sport and cultural facilities on education sites. The text indicates that community use of new and extended education facilities will be expected and should be incorporated into the design that allows for and optimises their potential use, with agreements for wider community access and sports facilities to be secured. St Peter's has a community access agreement to sports facilities covering areas of the site. This site is specifically designed to cater for the practice needs of the school pupils, notably years 7 and 8, and its curriculum needs. The site is also small and not floodlit and so has limited utility. In response, the school have identified that demand for the existing facilities subject to the community use agreement has been low and they are hired out quite infrequently. There is therefore felt to be no additional demand demonstrated for wider public use of the facilities. Officers have therefore not sought to challenge that. Since preparation of the report, a further letter has been received raising concerns specifically in respect of the quality of the submitted noise assessment, suggesting that the pattern of usage of the proposal will be substantially different from that modelled for the report, with shorter, more frequent bursts of noise. It is felt that the true experience of neighbouring residents has not been understood and concerns should be addressed predetermination and not through condition. Potential traffic impacts have also not been covered, and potential harm from construction and layout impacts have not been covered. 2 additional conditions are recommended. specifically a restriction on uses in respect of hockey and paddle, that they should not take place at the site. And also in terms of the provision of a formal landscaping scheme for the buffer area, which is the second condition. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So now move us on to the public speakers for today's application. And as mentioned earlier, there's two people that are registered to speak. The first person is Mr. Tim Bradbury, who's a local resident who's registered in objection. So Mr. Bradbury, if you'd like to come to the table, you'll see on the microphone in front of you, there's a little button that looks a little bit like a Wi-Fi symbol. And if you press that, it goes green. And that means that your microphone is live. You'll have 3 minutes to address the committee. You can start in your own time, and I'll give you a heads up if it looks like you're running over your 3 minutes. When you've finished, if you could just sit tight for a minute, because there may be questions from committee members. And if you pop your microphone on now, yeah, that's live. So start in your own time.
Thank you and good afternoon. I'm a resident of North Parade backing onto the development site. And to be clear, my objection is not to sport in principle, but to this development in this location immediately behind people's homes. My central point is that the noise impact assessment is not fit for purpose because it does not assess what the applicant has told residents this mugger is for. In the flyer sent to residents in December, St Peter's said the mugger would provide space not only for sports lessons, but also for much needed all-weather outdoor informal play space at break times, allowing the area to be used throughout the year rather than mainly in summer. However, the agent has stated the primary use is informal practice and play. That is critical because this is not a sports pitch for occasional structured use. It is an all-weather playground behind neighbouring homes. At present, this land is only used sporadically in summer by a small number of older pupils and only when it is not covered by cricket storage. What is proposed is a clear and substantial intensification of use, turning a lightly used seasonal area into a facility repeatedly used throughout the day, every day, all year round, including after-school practice, evenings, weekends and holidays. As a former assistant head teacher in a secondary school, I can say with confidence that the noise profile of children using a space informally out of lessons is extremely different from the noise of supervised children in a curriculum lesson or match. Noise generated through informal play is louder, more impulsive, less predictable and more intrusive, and that is what is now proposed as the primary use of this facility. So why is the NIA based on a typical sports lesson if the primary use is an all-weather informal playground? The NIA has not assessed the potential impact on amenity of the primary purpose of the facility. It does, however, recognise that the loudest noises in the lessons were shouting, which reinforces my point. The committee report accepts important shortcomings in the noise evidence and expressly states there is scope for harm to residential amenity from additional noise and disturbance, and that this should be afforded significant weight. There is also no noise management plan or complaints process before this committee. If the acceptability of this proposal depends on those measures, then they should be before you now to consider and not left until after permission has been granted. And while noise is my main concern, it is not the only one. There is still no construction management plan as requested by councillors Myers and Wells, no proper transport package as requested by Highways, and no real answer to the cumulative impact on residents from the wider rearrangement of the school site, combined with the fact that the closest entrance and exit to the mugger is the footgate onto North Parade. What is being proposed is not a modest sports facility, but a major year-round intensification of noisy, impulsive activity immediately behind people's homes based on an assessment that does not even examine the now stated primary use of this site, a site which is too close to neighbouring properties for that level of uncertainty. And for those reasons, I respectfully ask you to refuse the application.
Thank you very much, and you were well within your 3 minutes there, so thank you for that.
I wasn't when I was practicing.
I think everybody always speaks 10 to 15% faster when they're actually at the committee. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Bradbury? I'll just have one then, which is, oh, sorry, was that Councillor Culwick? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Can you describe how the situation is at present, given the use of the
At present, with the current cricket pitches, we hear the occasional strike noise and the occasional little bit of lesson noise, but they're not tended to be used outside of curriculum time, whereas this facility would replace what is currently a patch of grassland. So at the moment, it's very rarely used. It's used, as I said, in summer when young people are out playing on the school fields, and as I say, sporadically by small numbers, 10, 15 maybe. I see this regularly. My home office looks out over this area.
Okay. The question I was just going to ask as well, and you may not be able to answer this, so it's just to give us a flavour, I suppose. You'll have heard us as a committee just asking questions about the habitable or not habitable parts of the dwellings coming up to the boundary. And I just wondered if you have any sense of, obviously your own property, but any of your neighbours in terms of, are they largely converted and occupied? Are they largely outbuildings that are not occupied, or do you have a sense of
It's
that?
a genuine mix. I've got neighbours on both sides who have had various developments done. One, his kitchen extends outwards towards the to the end wall. Neighbours on the other side have extended halfway down their yard, so they've lost half the yard, but it's full width with windows and patio doors in, and that's replicated right the way down the street.
Thank you. That's helpful. Not seeing further indications, so thank you for your time today. If you want to take a seat back in the gallery. And then I'll invite up, so the next person we have registered is Giles Roberts, who's the applicant in support. And I believe you're also going to be joined at the table by Tracy Allen, who is the head of senior school, and Janet O'Neill, who's a planning consultant, who will be available to answer questions after Mr. Roberts has given his 3-minute presentation. So you'll have heard me explain how that part works. If you want to turn your microphone on and then start in your own time. And if I think you're running over your 3 minutes, I'll just give you a heads up.
Good afternoon, members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Giles Roberts, Director of Operations at St. Peter's School. The headmaster, Jeremy Walker, sends his apologies as he's away on a pre-arranged annual leave. This application involves an existing grassed area used for many years for informal sports activities. It is on the eastern edge of the campus, north of the cricket nets and south of teaching buildings. To make this space more usable, it is proposed to install an artificial surface and to fence the perimeter to restrain balls to within the pitch. The proposed pitch will provide an all-weather space for informal sport, practice and exercise, primarily for years 7 and age, that's age 11 to 14, and boarders, thus supporting pupils' health and well-being. The pitch will not be used for competitive fixtures such as netball, basketball and tennis, which will continue to take place elsewhere on the campus, where we already have dedicated courts constructed to sport-specific standards. Hours of use will be 8 AM to 7 PM weekdays and 9 AM to 4 PM on Saturdays. There will be no use on Sundays or bank holidays. There will be no floodlights on the pitch. The facility will serve only our existing school community and holiday clubs. It will not be open to the general public and will not generate additional traffic or parking demand. The noise recording was undertaken from the location of the pitch itself. Beyond the pitch, a new planting is a 2-metre wide footpath, a 3-metre high mature coniferous hedge, a fence line, a back lane, and the high brick garden walls of houses on the western side of North Parade. For local residents, these barriers serve to protect their privacy and reduce noise transfer. The construction period will be 4 to 6 weeks, with all contractors' vehicles arriving and leaving from Clifton. The build period for the adjacent Pascal teaching building to the north was 14 months, access from Clifton. It is not considered that a construction management plan will be required. We have agreed officers' proposed reduced hours of use and noise mitigation measures, including a noise management plan, incorporating a noise complaints procedure, ensuring a balanced approach that protects neighbours' amenity while allowing the school to meet its needs. In summary, this proposal delivers improved sport and recreation facilities for our pupils with appropriate safeguards in place to ensure that we use as applied for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and also within your 3 minutes, so that's great. Thank you. So members, do you have questions? Oh, right, lots of hands gone up. If you could just keep your hands up until I've acknowledged you, that'd be great. And Councillor Stewart, I saw you first.
Thanks, Jay. So it's just on the hours. Obviously, the hours have come down at the end of the day, but I'm just sort of thinking at the start of the day. So it's proposed this condition that you can't use it from 8 o'clock. Sorry, you can't use it until 8 o'clock. And I'm just sort of thinking, what would it likely be used for from 8 till 9? So thinking back to, when I was at school, all the games, all the sport was in the afternoon. You might have something like a lunch break, but particularly when you're talking about this particular age of children, and between 8 and 9 is obviously, as far as I'm aware, when they'll all be arriving for school, and the only games that you'd have, and I'd be surprised if there's any sort of organised, activities at that time. And so my thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, my thought would potentially be that you would either just have, kids having a knock around then, which could potentially be some of the loudest and most troublesome, or the alternative would be you'd have nothing whatsoever happening, in which case residents would be, needlessly worrying about that early, should we say, to some people, not to other people, start. So therefore, my question is basically, is that the case? Or is there, for example, something that happens at 8 o'clock or 8:30 some days that is very organised and matters? Or if, for example, the, start time was a bit later at 9 o'clock, is that something you'd be unhappy with? I know obviously you in your application, you've talked about wanting that start time and a later finish. You're happy to knock off later. So that's the question. Sorry, it's a bit rambling.
Yeah, so just to answer, pupils arrive from school starts at 8:20. So pupils can arrive from any time from 7:45 onwards. Now they can go to various spaces. We don't envisage any more than probably 15 to 20 pupils supervised in that area at that time before school starts at 8:20. There is the library to go to as well, and there is another area. So it would be an area where pupils have informal play just before school starts, but it would be supervised by staff. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, so it's particularly used. And is that's obviously this particular age group, or is that any pupils in St. Peter's that would go there?
That could, specifically at this point, it would be that age group because of the move to the 2-school model of the 7 and 8s coming to the senior school site.
Thank you. Councillor, supplementary on that point.
It seems like an opportune point to try and clarify the issues about whether this is curriculum based, which would be 8:20 to 3:15. And I would suggest it shouldn't be used outside of that, if that's what it's for, or what you have described, which is informal play. Can you clarify your intention? Is it for curriculum use only, in which case only during school hours? Or is it for informal play and curriculum based?
It's for both. It's primarily it's for the use for the children at 7 and 8, age 7 and 8, year 7 and 8, between when they can break time and at lunchtime. And then we have curriculum games. We've moved from when you were at school, we've changed the way we do games, and we have games periods right throughout the day. And this space is very useful for coaching, for one-to-one, for training, and it'll be used that way. So it's going to be a multi-use games area, but the informal at times will be supervised.
Okay. And I had you, Councillor Eyre, as the next substantive question as well.
This one's probably less surprising to you. If Gareth could get the picture back up again, it goes back to my earlier question as to there is critical use of that area at the moment of the cricket pitch. I couldn't see anywhere on that location that they could reasonably be relocated to. And obviously those I play cricket, so the cricket covers and the mobile nets needs to be in proximity to the pitch. You do not want to be, when the rain starts, going for a 20-minute walk to go and find the covers and wheel them all back again.
Just bear with us 1 minute. It just takes a minute.
I'm not sure it's actually on
to start up.
I'm not sure it's actually on the picture, but at the far side of the pitch, there is an area which has prepared down at the other side of the cricket wicket by the hedge. There's an area which is actually set aside for, it's got several wickets, which the mobile nets usually go on for playing on. We've actually stopped using those. We're using them more now with the mobile net on top of the wickets because we've got 14 wickets there. The boundary rope on the picture there is pushed right to the back for mowing. It is brought in and put appropriately for the age group and depending on what level and which wicket we're using. Those are put there on that photograph because it's really easy for them to be left there. As I think the planning officer said, there's space in the north of that, there's space on the, it's not the north, is it? On the east side of, the north side of that, and there's space on the west side of the cricket wicket where the cricket nets are often stored. So there's plenty of space on that pitch for it.
Okay. Councillor Fisher, you were next.
Thank you. I do apologise for sniggering when Councillor Eyre said he played cricket, but there we are. I'd just like to ask, have Have you read the Sport England guidance on the recommended minimum distances of muggers from residential properties? I have it here. It is, and it's adopted by a number of councils, including Buckinghamshire and Leeds, that muggers should be typically located a minimum of 30 metres from the boundary of the nearest residential dwelling to minimise noise, and the absolute minimum distance should be 12 metres, although the 30 metres distance is strongly preferred. Have you thought whether this is really an appropriate location given that guidance? I appreciate it's not statutory planning guidance, but it is a recommendation from the Sports Council.
So, members, what I'd draw your attention to is the agent of change principle, which is a well-known principle in planning, so that if you've got a garage and you've got a compressor and you're spraying cars, somebody moves in next door, it's too bad. The people spraying cars were there first. This school has been here for nearly 200 years on this site, and it's there for education and for exercise, and anybody who's moving in close to it knows it's a school. And so the school is there first and entitled to use its facilities for the purposes of education. Yes, we do have to be aware of residents, but what I'm saying is it's not a blank sheet. It's not as if you're doing one of these big schemes that are allocated in the local plan, these big greenbelt sites. And of course you wouldn't do that. But what you're doing is trying to make the best of the situation that there is.
Yep.
Thank you, but you would agree this is a significant change of use of that portion of land. So agent of change in no way applies to it because you are using that area of land for a completely different purpose to what's been used already. I'm well aware of agent of change, but this is not an agent of change effect.
Yeah, well, my take on that, councillor, is whether or not a school or a university or a college has to be, or a hospital, has to be segregated where you can only do certain things in certain areas. The use class is education, and that's what that area of land has use rights to carry out without it being in various sectors. And as I say, it's the same with the university and the same with the hospital.
Thank you. Did you want to add something as well?
Sorry, just to add that the space is currently used by pupils. So the cricket nets is used every lunchtime by a group of 15 to 20 pupils playing five-a-side football. It is used more regularly than I think it has been portrayed earlier in the meeting. So it is used every lunchtime without fail by a group of pupils.
Okay, thank you. You finished? I will come back to you, and Councillor Baxter, I had you as the next question.
Thank you, Chair. So in the officer update, we heard about the fact that there's currently not much demand from the community to use these facilities, and I was just wondering if you thought about, with the improved facilities, whether you would see more community use outside of those sort of core school hours, and if you were sort of advertising to the community to be able to use the new facilities. Thank you.
We've got lots of facilities on site which are specific for particular sports. So the Astro, the large Astro on the south side of the site has a carpet which is specific. It's a sand dress carpet specific for hockey. That's where you want to play hockey. Netball at competition level is played inside. So we play that on the internal sports. So in internal facilities inside our sports halls. The tennis courts we have, it's not good to play tennis at a high level on AstroTurf. You play that on tarmac or on grass. We don't have grass courts, but we've got a lot of tarmac courts. And we've actually got on the Astro another 9 courts for low-level tennis and training. We've got lots of facilities which are available already, which is why, and they aren't fully utilised, and we do advertise them. And some of our facilities are used extensively. We have 80 hours of use on our swimming pool, of which 60 hours a week is external use, including free use to Clifton Green Primary School. So we do reach out to the community and let people use our facilities. We don't think this is a good in a good location to be let. We don't think it would be advisable to let it for just the amenity of our neighbours, and that's part of the reason why we don't want it to have a community use agreement, because we want it just to use for our own pupils, to improve and give them space, more space on site inside of school hours.
I'm just going to jump in and just add on that because I think it's appropriate at this moment. So you've just described really very extensive facilities that the school currently has, and a lot of it, by the sound of it, is hard standing. I would just like to understand why those areas are not suitable for use for the informal sort of supervised playtime, break times that you're talking about for this area.
Yeah, so we're currently moving from a junior school to a senior school. We've had 3 different sections of the school. So in September 26th, year 7 and 8 will join up on the seniors part of the site, which is the images that you've seen above. And from that, we obviously want to have some outdoor space. Now, obviously, we live in York and the weather, you know, it can be intermittent in terms of rain, and our pitches get waterlogged. So in terms of the field space, normally, you know, in summer we let them play on the field, but the chances of the rain. So actually having a space that means that they could go and play out and not be bogged down in the fields. Obviously we want to protect our cricket pitches as well. And obviously the distance to the AstroTurf in terms of staff supervision wouldn't work in terms of the year 7 and 8 and the age of the pupils. So actually if we had that space and supervised, it would mean that they would get a better experience, but also in terms of safeguarding those pupils on site, it would be more beneficial for the school and pupils.
So just to be clear then, what I think you're saying is that where the year 7s and 8s will be within the school buildings is in a distinct physical different location than where the quite extensive facilities are currently located.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fisher, I'll come back to you.
Thank you. I have a lot of experience with a mugger, and it's a miracle I have any hair left after it, because one of the biggest problems was kids kicking the ball out of the mugger over fences and into people's gardens, hitting roofs, hitting conservatories. Have you given thought to putting some kind of covering and netting over the top of it to stop that? Because from my experience, that is one of the biggest problems with any mugger within any close range of a dwelling. Would you be willing to a condition to actually put a netting over the top of it to retain the ball at all times within the mugger?
It's not something we've considered. We don't have a problem with it on the cricket nets, but they have got a partial cover over one end of them. If that's something we could consider, that's possible. It's probably a piece of good advice from someone who's had experience.
Okay. I'm just looking for further questions. Councillor Melly.
From your description of the space where community can currently use your facilities, I was getting the impression that it's available for booking by maybe kind of more formal clubs and groups. Do you have facilities that are available just if local young people want somewhere to hang out, kick a ball about safely? Is there benefit to just any member of the local community, whether they're a member of a formal club or not?
The obviously complicating factor is that we're a boarding school, so we have pupils on site. So in terms of we have to go through a safeguarding risk assessment for any let that comes on site. So we don't have any ad hoc. It would have to go through. That being said, we do have voluntary groups that come in and use them, but it has to go through the booking system so that we know where they are at all times on the school site.
But it's kind of some sort of formal team or group or club that does that, rather than individuals being able to book it to hang out with a group of friends because they live nearby and want to benefit from having this in their community.
We have keeping children safe in education has changed. Every child that comes onto our site is our responsibility. So even if you come with a club, we've got to make sure that those children are safe and that club is fully, everything is fully in place. To have people just coming on site, turning up and playing is very difficult, and it's quite a complex piece of administration and organisation to organise, and it's not you really need to book in, and all the terms of our community use agreements don't say that we have to have open swimming pools and open facilities. We need to control who comes onto the site. The site is secure, like most schools. I'm not sure that's really reasonably practicable.
Okay, Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come back a little bit because it talked a bit about informal play and more structural or structured curriculum-based kind of activities. I'm just wondering whether you could say a bit more about what typically those involve. In terms of, I think you mentioned, what was it, 15 to 20 pupils will be using that space. I was just wondering whether you could talk a little bit more about, you know, what those activities will be and what kind of impact you're expecting from them, please.
Yeah, so if I just describe currently how the cricket nets are used when they're not being used for cricket nets. So at lunchtimes from 20 to 1 to 2 o'clock, after they've gone through lunch, various year groups go through at certain times, then probably 15 to 20 currently of actually year 11 go down there with a football and kick it around for half an hour before they then go back to register, before they then go to lessons. That's one example. So in terms of a lunchtime, other times could be like 3 to 4 pupils and one of the coaches just having an informal session, could be running through some ball skills. Yeah, so it's smaller groups rather than a mass of a year group or a mass of a team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks. I was actually probably meaning more how you envisage this space being used with the mugger and what activities you expect for the informal play to be taking place if you've experienced with 7 and 8 years, and then also what the sort of curriculum activities that will be taking place for 7 and 8 year 7 and 8 in that space on that mugger.
Yeah, so if I say the play time would be very similar, just with a tennis ball or a football, similar to what they do now, which is currently on the Astra further down, but obviously with them moving to the senior school site, there'll just be informal play with a tennis ball or a football, just kicking around playing five-a-side. And then in terms of the actual activities, they'll be doing tennis or netball or five-a-side football.
Okay. Not seeing further indications for any further questions, and I think everybody's asked the questions that I'd jotted down as possible ones that I might be inclined to ask. So thank you for your time this evening. If you want to take your seats back in the public gallery, and then we will continue with the meeting. And members, I'm just conscious we're coming up to the hour. Are we happy to carry on? Do we want a 5-minute adjournment? I'm seeing nods that people are happy to carry on, I think. Yeah. Okay, so we move then into questions for officers on the report and anything that's been brought up during the public participation. So again, just looking for indications. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you. It's just clarification on that usage issue, because all the analysis of noise is about its use for curriculum sport. There is no mention in the report anywhere about the noise impact from what has been described, which is a play area from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night, and on a Saturday and on a Sunday. So is it correct that we haven't got the accurate information in terms of the impact of noise? It's page 14, paras 515, 516, 517. It all refers to the noise from sports during curriculum times, not 15, 20 year 7s congregating up until 7 o'clock at night.
We did consult our public protection colleagues, and they would have had the whole package of the application, and they're not just provided with the noise report. They haven't objected to the principle. They did ask for more information in terms of the sports played and the modelling of the noise. But it has been presented as a, I was just looking at there's an email from the agents in March 2026. The proposed mugger is intended primarily as informal recreational space for 6 to 7-year-old pupils rather than for organised competitive matches. And that's the context within which we dealt with the application, and public protection have recommended conditions.
I think there's a bit of confusion there, because those two things are not that seems to be clarifying whether it's informal or competitive, which I quite believe Public Protection have read that as a statement that says it's not going to be used for competitive, it's going to be used for informal, which is different to what it is. My genuine concern is there is nothing in this paper that provides us, the committee, of any analysis of what the impact of this, other than as a sports facility and used for sports. I mean, it goes into detail about the noise of ball strike, etc. There is absolutely nothing about groups of children not playing any sports and being in there.
It was presented to us as being an informal practice area primarily for sport, not as primarily an area in effect as a playground.
So now we've got a disconnect between that and what we've just been told by the applicant want to use it for.
So I think in terms of just a point of clarification that might be helpful at this stage is whether or not we would consider there to be a distinction in use class between a playground and a sports practice facility. And I don't know whether I'm looking to Sandra or Gareth here in terms.
No, there isn't.
Because we have to think of it in terms of the planning. That's what where I'm at.
Yeah, but it's a noise generation. This is they can use it for whatever they want once they've got it, but we need to be aware as a committee whether the noise impact has been assessed correctly, which I don't think it has.
So in terms of use class, it's an educational facility. If we granted planning permission without any conditions, they could use it for any educational purpose. They could play tiny little football matches, or they could use it for informal play, or just as a playground, as lunchtime, before, after school playground. And it makes no difference. The only control that we have as a planning authority, if those issues are we see them as problematic, is to put them as planning conditions. I'm afraid I can't answer detailed questions about what Public Protection looked at. I'd be surprised if they didn't look at it in terms of the whole gamut of what it could be used for.
Yeah, it would have done.
But we don't have anyone from Public Protection to answer that question.
So I think that the steer that I have to then give as the chair is the officers have answered that question to the best of their ability, and when we come to determination, we need to weigh that as part of the planning balance in terms of where we feel as a committee we want to be. I don't think we can get further than that, but I think it is certainly a consideration in terms of what has been assessed and what the use that we've been told it will be.
I think members need to. So, Public Protection came up with the hours of use condition because of the potential for noise, and that's based on it's sport use, I gather, but it is ultimately it's part of a school estate, and the whole of that school estate can be used for any school use. The fact it isn't at the moment is presumably because it's a grassed area rather than a hard surfaced area. So obviously that's something for consideration. But it's all playing field at the moment and can be used for any school purposes at the moment. But yeah, I can't answer as I said before, I can't answer the question as whether Public Protection looked at that and felt it didn't warrant comment.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the hours, obviously we've got the conditioning of the hours, and the school has said, look, we don't want, you know, anybody around the, you know, around the sort of thing apart from our pupils for various reasons. But it's not conditioned, is it, that it's only for pupils? It's not conditioned that it has to be, you know, only those at the school. And the reason I ask that is because for 40% of the time, circa, we're going to be in holiday time. And so was that thought about at all, that if I was running the school, I'd have about 40% of the year when there won't be any borders I've got to safeguard or anything like that, and I might want to let that out. So it seems a bit strange that we've gone for these very detailed hours, but for a large amount of the year, those hours surely are meaningless.
Was our the hours are based on noise impact. We haven't put any conditions on about who can use them, whether they can be let out or not. But I think the school intends to use them for holiday clubs.
Yeah, I'm just looking to clarify.
It doesn't specify that. But there's nothing in the planning conditions that would prevent them from being used for holiday clubs. In the school holidays, because those hours mitigate against what the impacts that public protection thought there would be.
That's right. So I mean, personally, I don't have any great issue with if it was in holidays and in those hours, but I just think that, you know, sort of the school is saying, understandably, I'm sure it's absolutely the case, it's for school use. But then isn't there every chance that through the summer holiday, they say, well, actually, no one's here, so we'll just let it out to Yorkshire Cricket Club under nines or whoever. It's not cricket, is it really? But, you know, whatever it may be, that York City under nines or something like that. So, and therefore, is that something that we're happy with or not happy with? And it's not something that personally I'll be losing any great sleep over. But I think it's worth clarifying, because it all seems to be based on the hours are here because that's when the school will use it, but you don't have to worry about other people because, you know, they've got all the borders to safeguard. But most or a lot of the year they won't have borders. So.
No, I think the hours are recommended because of potential noise issues, and who uses it isn't an issue. So if it's used during the school holiday times, the mitigations through the hours of use condition and then the noise management plan are sufficient. It's not, the mitigation isn't that it's only used for however many hundreds of days the school is in session.
I understand that, but on a typical day, you've got basically 13 hours when it can be used. And obviously the applicant's saying, you know, they're not going to be using it for community use because they want it for their use. They don't want to have safeguarding issues and everything like that. But that 13 hours is a lot. And so therefore, we are not conditioning it, rightly or wrongly, that it has to only be for the school's use, because we're saying, well, we totally accept that the school won't want to have all these different groups coming in. But my thought is that 13-hour window is a lot in holiday time where the school could be looking to let it out. That's the point I'm thinking.
Well, the evidence we've been given is that subject to those hours, that wouldn't cause noise amenity issues.
I had raised a similar question privately, just in terms of, in theory, if committee wanted to go down this route or had concerns around this. And my understanding is that it would be open to us to add a condition around formalising the not letting it or not using it for intra-school competitive activities, both of which are referenced in the report and are given us assurances informally that wouldn't happen. But if committee was sufficiently concerned as to want to formalise that, then that would be, I believe, proportional and reasonable to do so. And I think, given the comments of Highways Development Control at 3.5, who object to the proposal on the grounds that it could be used for inter-school competitive sport, there would be a reason there quite clearly to formalise that. And I think that there's certainly objections have been raised around the intensification of use of this part of the school site, notwithstanding what's been said around the use class. I think there's probably still an expectation that even if you live next to a big noisy school, it's quiet during the summer break often, not always, but often. So again, I think these are things committee members can consider if we're minded to do so. Councillor Clark, I think you had a supplementary on this point as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I did have a supplementary, but I think it's been answered in that conversation. It's just that in the update, it does say something about community agreements low and they are hired out infrequently. I just wanted clarification whether that was just referring to the facilities that are already in existence and used, rather than the mugger to be, or perhaps to be.
It is what was explained to us as what is there at the moment, the full gamut of facilities that they have that they're able to let out under their community use agreement.
Okay. Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering whether officers could please provide a bit more clarity about this policy ED8 about community access to the facilities, because yeah, we've got a local plan policy that says education facilities will be expected and should incorporate community use of facilities, and agreements for wider community access to sports facilities will be secured. It seems quite strongly worded, but that's not included here. And we've heard from the applicants that they don't, well, I have the same confusion as some other committee members about whether this is specifically to cater for curriculum needs or whether this is specifically for informal recreational use for boarders. But assuming it's for informal recreational use, the school doesn't currently provide any community facilities for informal recreational use, only formal sports practices and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not phrasing this very well. Basically, we've been told there's not going to be any community access or community benefit from these new facilities in order to protect the community from unnecessary noise or disturbance, but there hasn't been an assessment of whether the local community could actually benefit from access to these facilities. I'm not entirely convinced that in Clifton there's, we're told there's no unmet demand for these sorts of recreational facilities, but I'm not really convinced that in an area like Clifton there's no unmet demand for youth services or access to informal recreational use of muggers for young people who happen to live nearby but don't go to this school. I'm just looking for some clarity of why this policy hasn't been applied and reassurance that there really genuinely couldn't be any community benefit from this, especially seeing as the protection, the reason for not allowing community benefit doesn't actually seem to be conditioned in terms of protecting residents from undue noise and disturbance. As has been said, that hasn't really actually been conditioned.
No, we didn't condition it. Maybe we could have, because it wasn't the intention at the time for the school to have a community use agreement on this particular facility. But obviously the school policy could change in the future. So if it was an issue that it was used for the community and we didn't want it to be used for the community because of external impacts, then the only way to control that would be by condition. The policy says community use of new / extended education facilities will be expected and should be incorporated into the design in a way that allows for and optimizes their potential use. Through the development process, agreements for wider community access, well, that's to existing sports and cultural facilities. So it was presented to us by the applicant that they weren't seeking they weren't seeking community use for this. That wasn't what they wanted. We haven't done our own assessment whether there's a need. We took the statements about the current community use on face value, and I've taken into account Highway's comments about public access and public use, and chose not to challenge them on the particular policy. So, as members are aware, we make planning decisions in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And our assessment was this is a time when material considerations indicated otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whitcroft, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. Just to cast a bit of light on something that was raised in public participation about a construction management plan. I've not really dealt with a structure of this kind before, I don't think, on planning. So what's the requirement for this for a construction management plan, and whether there needs to be one? Could you just outline what the criteria would be?
Normally, it's for major developments, ones that will have significant impacts for a significant length of time. I think the speaker said that the construction period for this is 4 to 6 weeks. Just got ground prep, building the fence. We wouldn't normally put have a construction environment management plan on a scheme of this nature and this size.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that we have the local authority has other controls through Environmental Protection Act and Control of Pollution Act if there are nuisances from construction sites, but yeah, the doubling up with that with a planning condition we don't think is necessary.
Okay, I've not seen further indications from committee members for questions. I've just got a couple of questions, but Councillor Culwick.
Thank you. I'd be very interested to know if there's any helpful legal input in response to the questions that were raised by Councillor Fisher and the answers that were given by the applicant in terms of the existing use and the proposed application.
Sorry, specifically what, Councillor? Because I think that Gareth dealt with the planning use issue.
The guidance that was referred to by Councillor Fisher, which is not
planning. Oh, the Sports England guidance.
Yes.
I'm not familiar with it. I'm not familiar with it. I can't comment on it.
And wouldn't have any legal bearing on.
It's I don't know whether the planners have any view as to what whether they consider it to be a material consideration. It is how much weight should be. It's a matter for members as to how much weight should be attached to a material consideration. It's some policy from Sport England. I don't know whether the planners have any view as to the status of it in the planning context.
Well, it's guidance from Sport England, and it's generally in respect of noise and glare from floodlighting. We had a noise assessment, which to our mind covered the issues of noise from sports uses adequately. So yeah, I guess if you didn't have any noise, assessment, you might look at that guidance and say, well, the guidance says this. You haven't provided us with anything that says otherwise.
Okay.
But we weren't in that situation. We have our own assessment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
It was just to hopefully help. From Google, it says Sport England generally advises locating a multi-use games area, especially if floodlit, at least 12 metres and ideally more than 30 metres from residential properties. So without wanting to go too far, I would suggest that when this isn't floodlit, and obviously there's an existing use of some noisy things going on there, this would comfortably meet that with the 12 versus 10. But...
Okay, thank you. I think again, it's something to have in consideration, but it's a separate piece of guidance out with the planning system. So the question that I had, which I just wanted to sort of acknowledge really and just partly test from officers, is just in relation to, obviously this is a development within a conservation area. The report identifies that there is harm, but it's less than significant and at the lower end of that scale. But nevertheless, there is a requirement, therefore, for a public benefit to be found. And obviously, this is a private fee-paying facility, and more specifically, I think it is only for a very small group of the children who attend that private fee-paying facility. So in terms of a public benefit for committee to weigh against the harm, and acknowledging that it's regarded as a low level of harm, could you just explain how that public benefit is met, and whether or not it being a very restricted group reduces the weight that you might give to that public benefit, or if it is just a tick, there is a public benefit?
There's nothing in the MPPF, and there's nothing in our policies which seeks to differentiate between state and fee-paying education. So all the policies in the MPPF and all our policies in the local plan, which encourage improvement of education facilities, appear to apply equally. Therefore, if you consider that improving the facilities, educational facilities or facilities in an education establishment are a benefit, I think that that benefit applies for either sector. There's nothing that suggests that public benefits can't apply just to a particular sector of the public. They don't have to apply to every member of the public. And I haven't seen anything that contradicts that view in the guidance that I've seen. So I think as long as we consider that there is a public benefit, it's a public benefit that can be used to outweigh or otherwise any impacts on the character and appearance, or any harms on the character and appearance of the conservation area. I don't think the fact that it's a private or a fee-paying school diminishes that benefit.
Yeah, Chair, if it helps to just to confirm that I think that when you're considering what is a public benefit, I think something can be a public benefit even if it only benefits a section of the public.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you very much. Okay, so unless there are further questions, Councillor Burton, I'm just reminded that you were going to ask a question on the plans, and I said wait until the officers' questions, but I haven't called you for a question. I don't know if it's been covered already, potentially.
Not exactly. I grew up with a school at the back of my house, and we welcome the noise of children playing. So I'm maybe a bit biased, and I should have declared that too. So I wondered, would erecting sort of a glass wall, which I know I think gyms are doing when they have this paddle courts installed, I've noticed they've all got glass surrounding them. Would that help in any way to erect a glass wall behind the hedge, again near the court, and it could help with letting the balls out? I suspect it would add quite a bit of cost to this.
We've, paddle has its own complexities in terms of the noise environment.
Yes, I wasn't suggesting,
Uh,
I noticed paddles being excluded. I was just noticing that at my gym, for instance, they've got paddle courts mad, and they've got also these glass panels now to shield from noise and balls going over around all the paddle courts. So I just,
Right, from a noise mitigation rather than part of the
yes,
I don't know.
I suspect so. I don't quite know. I don't
ball
play
free
paddle
paddle.
myself, but
Um,
it was more just in a general capacity.
well, that
to-
hasn't
to-
been,
yeah.
the need for additional hard mitigation hasn't been identified. Subject to the conditions that we've included, excluding certain types of sports, and restricting the hours. So there wouldn't be, we wouldn't be able to, at this point, we wouldn't be able to identify that there's a necessity for that, which would mitigate some harm, such that we would be able to impose it as a condition. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. One of the objections that the ward councillors have made is about the potential future flood lighting. Is that something that we would be able to put as a condition, that they wouldn't be able to put that in future?
There is a condition, although it's a very short condition, so I can understand. I couldn't find it myself actually, but I knew I'd written it. Condition 10 on page 20 says there should be no lighting of the multi-use games area. Fixed lighting would always require planning permission, and members who were on the planning committee for the permanent lighting of the hockey pitch will remember that that was lit by demountable floodlights, which wouldn't have required planning permission because they were immovable. But condition 10 should cover both scenarios.
But does it just sort of says lighting? I mean, you could put a few odd lights around there, and that would be very different to huge floodlights, which not only are incredibly tall, but also would have a lot more scope to sort of affect the surrounding houses. Would that be covered in the lighting bit, is sort of what I'm asking?
Yeah, we haven't used the word floodlighting.
Sorry, I'm being pedantic, but it's just there's a big difference
Well,
isn't there, between the odd light and
I
floodlighting.
think this would cover all lighting, with the exception of, I'm not sure if the drawings show lighting along the path. Yeah, there is existing lighting. Sure, I've seen it somewhere. Oh, there you go. Oh no, you can't see that. I can see it. Take my word for it. I will draw you a picture of words. So there are lighting in bollards that run the whole length of that path, that runs the whole length of the hedge, and that's already in existence. There's nothing on the drawings which show there's a need for any that show any security lighting or anything like that. And the condition as written would exclude any new lighting. At any time.
Okay, and a final question from me, I think, if I can articulate this properly, and it's just on the sort of agent of change and the intensification of use and just in that area, just to understand it fully. So I fully appreciate the agent of change, and I appreciate what's been said about the existing use in terms of it being a school use and you know, and therefore I think if you had a car mechanics that was doing one car a day, and they expanded their facility to do 20 cars a day with the associated noise with that, that wouldn't be covered entirely by agent of change. It might be something that you would hold in part of the balance, but that intensification of the use of that area would also be of consideration, I think, in terms of the weighing the pros and cons of an application. And I just wondered if we can get a steer in this. And I appreciate there's the conditions around use as part of the mitigation, and members may or may not want to further condition around the summer holiday use. But I think it is clear that there is an intensification of the use of this area, and to what extent can that be afforded weight? What sort of weight can that be afforded within that sort of balance between the existing use and the agent of change?
It all stems from the fact that there is some operational development taking place. So the car repair garage, if the car repair garage works from a small corner of a big shed, and then thinks, hang on, why am I not using the whole of this shed? That intensification doesn't require any form of planning permission because there's no change of use. The planning unit is the same, and there's no operational development, no building, no new structures, and that's the same with the school. So the school has X hundred students. If for some miracle it could change to X thousand without any operational development, there's nothing the planning system can do to stop that. And similarly, if there's a vast area of hard surfacing, there's nothing the planning system can do to stop educational use of any part of those grounds. What brings it into consideration is the fact that there is operational development, and as part of that operational development, if you can identify that this may cause X issue or Y issue, be that an area of car parking or an area of playground, then that's something that you can put into the balance. But you would have to link it to what's actually being applied for. So the fact that more students are going to use this area because it's designed specifically for that use is a perfectly valid consideration.
Thank you. That's definitely helpful. Thank you. Okay. I think we're at the end of questions, and I'm just going to double check again. We've now been going an hour and a half. Are we happy to plough on into debate, or do we want a 5-minute adjournment? I think everybody's 5 minutes. Yep. Okay, let's take a 5-minute adjournment. I make it just coming up to 6 o'clock. So if we could be back at 6:05 sharp, and if I could just remind everybody not to discuss the application, not to speak to members of the public during the adjournment. Thank you. Hey, welcome back everybody to today's meeting of Planning Committee. We are partway through the determination of the application for construction of a multi-use games area on land at St Peter's School. We're now moving into the debate part of the hearing, so I'll invite members to give a sense of where they are on the application, anything that they're thinking about it. I'm not at this point looking for proposals in relation to the recommendations. And I'll just remind all members very politely that if somebody's just made all the points that you were about to make, you can just say that you agree with that councillor rather than repeating them all over again. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm very surprised we're here today at committee for this application, particularly with the new call-in process where there is a higher bar. I mean, I've asked some questions to probe what I think are some of the technicalities of the conditions, but looking at the objections from the ward councillors, looking at then the reasons for calling. The reasons for calling is just ticking 3 boxes. There doesn't seem to be anything notable I can see about this application whatsoever. There was a tiny mention of the conservation area in Clifton, which obviously was not deemed by anybody else to be a material consideration or have any outweighing weight of material consideration. Everything else then is broadly about the noise, which, as we've heard, is about a school having a use of people playing and a school having a slightly different use of people playing. And as we've heard, that school has been there for some considerable time. There doesn't seem to be any notable public interest. We have 15 objections. We have only 1 member of the public here and no ward councillors. So I'm really very surprised to see this application here at Planning Committee, and I'm absolutely mystified as to what is notable for it. So at this point, I won't go in any way political on the call-in councillors and the nature of the operation. However, what I will say is I'd be amazed if anybody's going to oppose this. Absolutely amazed if anybody would oppose this. We might have a bit of discussion on the conditions, but even then, for me, about the whole thing about, and I have to say I entirely agree with the points made by Councillor Burton about welcoming the sort of noise of children playing and all those sorts of things. Generally a positive thing, and children have been playing on those in that area for years and years and years. I certainly did many decades ago, as now was. So from my viewpoint, I mean, I would very happily move proposal, although you don't want to hear that yet. But so I would happily move proposal. On the conditions that we've sort of talked about on the hours, I do think there's some strange things there in terms of the whole term time or not term time. The community aspect, I'm actually coming at a slightly different angle, because obviously we've heard from the community that are, concerned about the noise, whereas I'd be a lot more of what I think the areas Councillor Melly was going into about if this facility is here, can it be used in a greater way for members of the community so it doesn't impede residential users, but can a school that hopefully does lots of good things to the community do something more in that? Who knows? But that ship has sort of sailed. I wouldn't worry about any sort of higher netting or fencing or anything like that. For me, these things can be looked at in the future if need be. And I would think the applicant would very much be a case if their balls keep going into everyone else's gardens, they'll get sick of people complaining about the balls going in the gardens, and they will look at that sort of thing. So I think it'll be onerous for us to condition in that sort of way, and it would be going against the advice of officers who have felt there isn't the need for that to be done. So yeah, I'm happy to move proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Always lots of interesting points for consideration there. And I will just note that the call-in request form is on the planning portal, so you can see the reasons that were granted there for why it's come to committee.
It only has 3 boxes ticked. Is there more to it than that? It just literally has 3 boxes ticked. I thought there'd be some larger case than that. There's their objection from months ago, and then 3 boxes.
And then there's a officer summary of where the officers are, and then there's the chair and vice chair's decision making in terms of whether we felt it was valid to bring to committee. And we did feel that it was valid to bring to committee due to the nature of the objections, the number of objections, and the fact that it was a balanced decision rather than a very clear one way or the other in terms of determination. And we'll see how the debate and conversation plays out. But it certainly was a thought through process. So I had a number of people's hands go up, and I'll keep looking for other hands as well. So in the order that I saw them, I have Councillor Eyre, then Councillor Watson, then Councillor Fisher, then Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. I'll refrain from making comment on when Councillor Stewart isn't or isn't being political, because I think our views might disagree slightly on that one. I think in principle, the use, as Councillor Stewart said, is absolutely fine. It makes sense. It is this confusion about the wider use of the building and what information we've been presented with. And I went back again. It is simply an issue of noise consideration. That's not to say whether the noise is fine or not. My point is I really can't tell from what's been presented. That very detailed paragraph does say quite clearly, paragraph 1, samples of noise inputs from a range of games. There is an analysis of whether longer games and high ball strikes would have more of an impact. There is then a paragraph on whether AstroTurf deadens the sound of the sports. And it does say quite categorically it would be used primarily for informal practice of existing sport. So it's very clear that the only analysis of noise we have relates to its use as a sports facility, not anything else. So that is the difficulty I find, and I don't think I could go against it. So I would agree with Councillor Stewart, it's difficult to vote against. Whether I can vote for is probably more difficult. There is a significant intensification of the site, as Councillor Stewart and the applicant said. Yes, it is being used for informal play, but by the nature of light and weather, it's restricting in terms of what that actually can be used for. When it's wet and boggy, there is not the possibility for people to use it in the same way. It will be much more easy to use more times of year. The hours again are quite strange. And I suppose I was just putting sense in that. There's a very difference between a group of 15 people playing five-a-side football supervised by a PE teacher and 7 or 8 students making TikTok videos, playing music on their phones, as I know, the type of things, having a year 8 daughter, the type of things that actually happen on these things. And that's a very different type of noise profile of somebody doing something like that versus that play. And there just isn't the information. I suspect, as Councillor Burton said, it possibly is quite fine, and maybe, go back to separation distances. It's more Steve Ovett than a Seb Coman, but his playing field association recommends even further distances, 30 metres, for recreational play facilities over and above that of a mugger, for example. So that's the type of thing that should have been in the report, which would have given us a better sense. So I don't know whether that was a misreading from our public protection team, whether they know that just a shame that they didn't have a fully comprehensive assessment of the noise impact of all of the uses that were proposed, rather than just a sample of what it would be like for sport. So probably looking towards abstaining at the moment, but I shall listen to the debate.
Thank you, Councillor. Just in relation to the noise elements, my understanding is that there's been a slight change in emphasis in terms of what the primary use or the expectation of the primary use of this is from the point of the application versus some of what we've heard this evening. And I think that that's what then explains some of the perhaps missing reference that you're referring to in terms of the noise. And again, as I mentioned earlier, that is something for committee to consider whether they think that that's of significant weight or otherwise. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. This is one of these planning applications where we're seeing a conflict of use of land, and it's therefore only on a bound that we should consider in detail all the aspects which really have been canvassed before us this evening. I think it's worth just stating those aspects which we are disregarding. First and foremost is a question of additional traffic generation, and I'm satisfied that the answers given are such that that is not an issue for us today. The second point I've noted is a complaint of the development being overbearing, and again, answers which we've received and details from the paperwork indicates that the height of the meshing will in fact be no higher than the hedge itself. The third complaint and fear was in respect of illumination. And in fact, as Gareth has mentioned just a few moments ago, there is a specific condition prohibiting illumination. Something which needs a little more consideration is the impact on the Clifton conservation area and the aspect of public benefit. I think irrespective of the aspect of public benefit, I came to the conclusion that the impact on the CCA was in fact going to be de minimis. And at the same time, there is public benefit to be had because youngsters are going to have a sporting facility which otherwise they would not have. Very interesting questions raised in respect of whether or not those public benefit could be restricted to a certain class. And I think officers are perfectly correct to say there's nothing in the either the local plan or the national framework to differentiate between children who might go to state schools, children who go to fee-paying schools, and children who go to fee-paying schools on a scholarship basis. And therefore it is appropriate to read public benefit as benefit for some of the community. So the real aspect really comes down to the issue of noise disturbance. And we've established that this mugger, it's going to be restricted in the games which can be played on it because hockey and paddle are precluded. We've noted it is 10 or 11 meters from the actual boundary wall of the houses on North Parade and 15 or so meters away from the multi-story wall. What I think I ask as a key question is, what exactly can the school do on this land at the moment? There's nothing to stop them putting up goalposts and having numerous games of football. So there's nothing to stop them marking out tennis courts and having numerous games of tennis on the land. The fact they don't do it at the moment is arguably not relevant to the decision-making process. Indeed, if they wanted to, they could go and have a history lesson on that area, at that area of land. So weighing everything up in the balance and accepting that effectively the use of the pitch, the mugger, will effectively be constrained by the hours and not curriculum hours. I come to the conclusion, like Councillor Stewart, that this is an application in which officers have made the correct recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Fisher, you are next.
Thank you. 2013, Spencer Parish Council had a nice area of AstroTurf with a goal on it. Kids play football on it, not a problem ever. No complaints whatsoever. In 2013, a group of football parents decided to ask us to put a mugger up, so we did. Everything changed from that moment because muggers, because of the way that the game is played both ways, so there's tackling and such like. Also, the fact that the mugger makes a hell of a noise when the ball hits the side of it, it hits it a lot. We got inundated with complaints. I tried very hard. I joined the council in 2015. I tried to get it taken out. The council held on, and then we got a civil lawsuit against us, citing noise disturbance and the impact of the balls against the side of the house and intrusion by people going to get them back. In the end, we had to take the mugger out because it was clear we're going to lose the legal case. Now, that's the worst case scenario, partly because we had no control over the site. The school does have control over the hours of use. The noise mitigation, I feel, in this case is just about adequate. The presence of that 3-metre high hedge will act as an acoustic barrier and will deflect the noise upwards. And although it's fairly close, ours was about 10 metres away, this is about 11. The fact that the hours of use are restricted as they are, I think will deal with the noise complaints. The one thing it won't deal with, and for some reason on a mugger, all kits turn into Peter Kay and the John Smith's advert, have it. Try to kick the ball out of the mugger and it invariably goes into people's gardens, or it hits greenhouses, conservatories, all sorts of things. I strongly recommend that we put a condition on to put netting over the top of it, because that completely removes that problem. Now, if that condition is put on, and I'm certainly going to recommend that it is, and with the noise strategy, the hours of use, I think this application is just about acceptable, even though it is close to the minimum distance recommended. I think they can get away with it. But please don't think that an informal game of football on an area of open space generates even remotely as much noise as a mugger does. It's a different level. It's a question of how you mitigate that noise and make it bearable. And I think the hours are reasonable.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Councillor Melly.
My main area of concern with this, as you probably guessed from questions earlier, is the non-compliance with policy ED8. I don't feel like the reasons we've been given about why that policy isn't being applied really stand up to scrutiny. We've been told there's no demand for informal play space because the facilities that are currently not available for informal play space are not being used for informal play space, and that's an example. That's the reason why there's no demand for it, apparently. We're told it's not possible because informal play space, you wouldn't be able to require people to book. Well, there's informal play spaces, muggers, tennis courts and parks all over the city where you don't have to be a member of a team. It doesn't have to be formal practice. You don't have to have a coach. If you want to just hang out, kick a ball about with a mate, you can book it and use it. So it's perfectly possible to implement booking systems for informal play space. And traffic, I don't think that a small group of young people, teenagers hanging out, kicking ball about would generate any traffic. So yeah, we have a policy which I think is quite firmly worded. Agreements for wider community access to sports facilities will be secured. And I don't see any reason why that policy shouldn't be applied. So I think that's a concern. But I'm not convinced it's enough to mean that this isn't acceptable development. I think it will do some harm to resident amenity in terms of noise, but not enough to outweigh the benefit of having improved sports facilities for people who attend the school. It's a shame that that benefit is only for people who attend the school and not the wider community who need it and could benefit from it. Oh yeah, another reason that was given for why there couldn't be any community use was because that would increase that noise and amenity harm to local residents. But I don't see how that's the case, because we're also advised by officers that if there's appropriate conditions, that the amenity of neighbouring properties can be properly safeguarded. So there's conditions about what hours it can be used, not having any lighting, that sort of thing. So I don't see why it makes any difference whether it's members of the community being able to use that space for community use to just hang out, kick a ball about, or whether it's matches, external fixtures, that sort of thing. So I think either this needs to be deferred to come back with, or a condition added and a decision made today to add that community access, or if the committee feels that community shouldn't have that benefit of this development to protect their amenity, then more conditions need to be added to protect that amenity.
Okay, thank you. Any further indications for anybody who wants to speak in terms of debate? Councillor Melly?
Sorry, I just wanted to add, this distance thing is interesting. When there is Sports England guidance about distances from properties, it would have been interesting to see that in advance and be able to assess what weight that should be given. Because if that's guidance is there, we should look at it. But from what I've heard in the meeting today, I'm not sure that's realistic in built-up areas. I think if we were to rigidly to comply to guidance like that, that's how we end up in situations where built-up areas have no outdoor sports facilities whatsoever. It's not in highly built-up areas. It's not realistic to have such huge distance between residential properties and sports facilities. You end up with none at all in that situation.
Thank you, Councillor Melly. And I should just draw committee's attention to page 9, paragraph 3.9, which is Sports England are a statutory consultee and they haven't raised an objection. We can infer from that what they have or haven't done in terms of applying their own guidance, but they haven't formally come back to the planning authority with any objection to this. Just then, from my perspective, I think I'm not going to repeat the things that have been articulated, and there's certainly been some very good points that have been well made. I do still have some concern over the intensification of use. I think that it's been very clearly articulated by officers that this is a site which has existing use, and yeah, I don't dispute that whatsoever. I think the fact that it's a site that can't be used or isn't used year round because of the nature of the site and then will become usable year round does represent an intensification. And whilst I have some sympathy with the argument of, you know, you move next to a school, you expect that there will be noise from the school. I think there's a difference between general noise from the school and noise right outside your house from regular use. So I think that is of concern to me. What I don't see or haven't heard articulated is anything that indicates to me that would be of such sufficient weight as to warrant a refusal. I am a little bit concerned about the, well, I say a little, I'm more than a little bit concerned. I'm concerned about the change in emphasis that's been presented this evening that appears to be slightly at odds with the emphasis that was previously given to officers in order to make the assessment. I suppose what I've been thinking throughout the debate is whether or not, even with that emphasis, would that have materially changed the outcome in terms of the mitigations that are being put in place and the recommendation. And I think on balance, but it is very much on balance, I'm not sure that it would have sufficiently changed the weighting as to either warrant different conditions or something different than the officer recommendation. But I do feel uneasy about that, and that's not common for me in the chair. I'm usually fairly clear that I know which way I think things ought to go. So that's where I am in terms of my thinking. There's obviously been a couple of suggestions around conditions, and I'd also raised the possibility earlier on in the discussion as well around whether or not we wanted to consider anything to restrict the use over the summer in terms of private lettings and that sort of thing as well. So I think what I'm going to suggest that we do, so first of all, there was a specific suggestion from Councillor Fisher about conditioning to add netting over the top. So I'll take that as proposed, and I'll just see if there's anybody who wants to second that as a condition. Councillor Eyre. Okay, so members, are you proposed and seconded to add that as a condition? In the event that this was to go to an approval, are you all happy that that would be added as a condition? If I could see, okay, if I could, I think there's enough discrepancy that I'll take a vote on it. So, sorry.
Just as members are aware, we have to put a reason on conditions, and those reasons normally. Where's my? Oh, that's sorry. That normally follows for the necessity of planning conditions. So you need to consider the reasonableness and the necessity why you're putting the condition on, and that needs to be articulated in the reason for the condition. And
protect the amenity of neighbouring residents. Was that from
ball strike?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's been proposed and seconded then to add that condition to protect from the amenity of residents from bull strike. So if I can see all those in favour of adding that as a condition in the event that an approval, if you could raise your hands now, please. And all those against? And abstentions. Okay, so there are 3 in favour and 2 against, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 abstentions. So that does pass. I'm a little uneasy at that passing with such small amount of support from the committee. I'm not sure there's anything I can do about that, to be totally honest. We've had a vote. That's what that is. The next suggestion, I think, Councillor Melly, you were suggesting that you might be thinking of wanting there to be some condition around community use in the event of it being approved. Have you given consideration to how that might work in terms of wording?
I haven't. I just think it's unsatisfactory that we have a condition which is quite strongly worded, not a condition, sorry, a policy that's quite strongly worded that hasn't been met without any kind of assessment about why it hasn't been met and why it's not reasonable to impose a condition. Is there standard wording that officers already use for community access to sports facilities that can just, it's already written that can be added without it being too much extra?
I think I might invite officers just to respond just in terms of if the concern is that it hasn't been assessed and not met, there may be some assurance that they can give that it has been assessed and not met. If we feel that it hasn't been assessed and not met and want to word a condition, then we just need to think about what that condition might be and what the reason might be for it.
I'm not sure I can add any more to what I said originally in response to questions about this. So there is a condition. There isn't a condition. There is a policy. We took into account what school said in terms of what they saw as demand, and that it wasn't their intention to enter into any form of community use agreement. We didn't challenge that. We did look at highways concerns and the concerns of local residents in terms of whether that would attract additional vehicles as part of our balance of why we didn't look any further into community use, and we came to that decision, which is what's in front of members today.
So can I just clarify? I don't think there's a condition that says there can't be community use.
So when I said the word condition, I meant policy, but there isn't a when I started off with that, there isn't a condition that says they have to, and there isn't a condition which says they can't if they want to.
So it means we haven't actually really assessed what those highways and traffic impacts would be to be able to condition to mitigate against them.
No, and I mentioned that again during questioning, where I said that there isn't a condition, and maybe there should be a condition if we feel that's something which is of concern and needs controlling. Because whilst the school don't intend or don't wish to enter into any community use agreement at the moment, that might change in the future.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I haven't got a specific proposal or wording in mind. I just feel that it's left a bit open and unspecific, where either there needs to be community use. I think from my understanding of what was said by the applicant, they're saying that there isn't any unmet demand for like formal practice use by community clubs. They haven't assessed whether there's unmet demand for informal recreation space.
Yeah, that's not normally what our community use agreements seek to secure. It is normally that slightly more formalised use, but I don't think it would stop a group of individuals I don't know, if you wanted to be playing netball or basketball or farm-side football and getting together with another club. But there is that element of sort of formality rather than, an open gate, which allows people to go in and use the facility.
Yeah, well, again, it doesn't necessarily have to be an open gate. I mean, there's a mugger in my ward that you can book to use. You book it, you get given the code to the gate, you go in. It doesn't mean it's just open to the public for anyone to go in anytime.
I
But
think,
sorry, Chair, I think the problem is just the ambiguity between there's no requirement to have community use because of the noise impacts and traffic impacts, but there's no condition that says there can't be community use in order to prevent those noise impacts or traffic impacts. We've kind of got both or neither are allowed, and no actual control or conditioning or mitigation of any of the potential impacts either way.
So I think that the steer I'm going to give you is if you can either give me a condition that you would like to be added, or if just to remind everybody really that conditions are there to mitigate against the harms of a development that make it unacceptable to you. Without that condition, you may determine that that is not acceptable for you to approve, and that's within your gift as a member of the committee. But what I can't do is sort of move us forward without a sort of a formal condition that you want to add. I appreciate all the points that you're making in terms of the ambiguity around it. I saw Councillor Eyre and Councillor Stewart both indicating, I don't know if you wanted to comment briefly on that as well.
Just my concern is that the highways advice we've got and tacit approval from highways is based on the use as presented to us today, which is no use outside the school. If we add anything in that allows for school use other than the school, then that completely invalidates all of the highways advice we've got, and therefore we haven't got any grounds to make a decision from a highways perspective. I would also point out that one of the grounds for calling was that the ward councillors did not want it to be used by outside bodies, and they were concerned that the use of outside bodies would be an issue.
Thank you. And Councillor Stewart.
Thanks. Yeah, I do worry we're going into far too much detail about hypotheticals. And if we'd started this application 5 years ago, paddle wouldn't have existed, never mind us being able to ban it. So things will change. On the netting point, archery and golf are not banned. So logically, we should have as good as solid netting to prevent the risk of somebody being shot by something that's fired by an archer or a golf ball. I just think massively over worrying about some of these things. And on the idea that the netting is brought forward on a majority of, a number of 3 out of 11 people, esteemed committee members though those 3 may be. I do have my doubts. So my question is about the process, which is obviously the first thing we have to do is test the officer's recommendation. And it is a genuine question in terms of, I've moved approval. So do we not then test that motion for approval rather than see how many different things can be added to that approval motion and conditions that may or may not be there? Do we not go with, first of all, it's moved for approval as is, and then if that's so outlandish, then people vote it down and then add conditions and bring something else forward?
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. First of all, obviously, wayward arrows from archery may have something that is outwith of the planning process if something like that were to happen. And I absolutely hear what you're saying in terms of numbers on committee, but we have a process, we have a vote, and if a majority of members wish to abstain, that is within their gift to do so. So I'm not going to revisit that. And as you'll be aware, we would routinely get to a point where I would seek a proposal and then a seconder before we would vote. We haven't got a seconded proposal at the moment, although there are people who've indicated that they might be. But what then often frequently happens is people start wanting to add in conditions. And given that we have discussed a number of conditions and a number of people have mentioned them during debate, it seemed to me to be prudent to actually get that dealt with and thought about before we reach the point of considering the officer recommendation. But I do agree as well that there is a line where we all have to accept as a committee that either there is a clear need for a condition or there isn't, and that condition being there or not may or may not determine which way you feel that you wish to vote on something. So I think probably what you're saying in a fairly long-winded way is, can we hurry up? which I have sympathy with, as I've responded in a fairly long-winded way as well. That being said, I do think we need to just go through these various points, and the other condition, which I think in a way is the counter to the point that Councillor Melly was making, which was something that I'd suggested is something that we could consider, and I think personally it is something that we should consider as adding a condition. So I would propose it, which is that we formalise the no inter-school matches on this site, and that we also formalise the no private letting. And I think the reason I've gone through my head as we've been thinking about it, I do worry a little bit about after school or summer holiday activities, but there are other areas of the St. Peter's site which may be better used by those sorts of facilities. And I think when you consider the noise impact that we all are accepting is there and is a harm of this development on the near neighbours, then some form of mitigation is at least having those quite lengthy holidays that there are in St. Peter's, knowing that that is a time when you will not be having the disturbance. And given that that is also the summer time, the time when you're most likely to have your windows open and you maybe be out in your back garden, I think that's a reasonable mitigation against the harm that will be brought by the intensification of the use. So that would be my proposal, is that we add a condition that covers those 2 points. And I'd look for a seconder on that and also a vote. I'm seeing 2 or 3 seconding. Councillor Melly, is that a seconding as well, or was that what you wanted to comment? No, it's a second. Okay, so I'm going to follow the same process, and I'm just going to go by show of hands.
Chair,
yes.
You've made reference to private letting. How would you define private letting?
I mean, I think we could seek advice from legal in terms of what is and isn't appropriate. I would understand it to mean the letting to anybody other than St. Peter's School for use, using that space.
So, for instance, if the school invites free of charge other organisations to use the site over the summer holiday, that would not be included in your definition.
I'm not in a position I think I would seek advice from either planning or legal in terms of what is and isn't appropriate. My understanding would be that we would be seeking a condition that would say that facility would not be used outwith of term time or during term time for an external user. Councillor Stewart. Oh, sorry.
Well, Chair, I do think that if members are looking to impose conditions, they do need to tell officers what it is they want. Then officers can draft that.
Yeah.
But I think officers do need to understand who you are trying to prevent, and what is meant by only school use. What is meant by that in light of.
Well, I think I would hope that I've been reasonably clear in terms of what my understanding would be. My understanding would be that we would be seeking to prevent use of this site outside, not just, so there's the hours of operation that are already conditioned, and then we would be looking to seek to restrict the use for non-school related activities outside of I mean, I think term time is probably the most simple way of defining it. But it would be for outside bodies, other people to come and use that space at times when the school is not using it.
I see. So in response to Councillor Watson's query, you would say, yes, what you're seeking is outside bodies would be able to come in and use it invited by the school. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't. I don't think I would be saying that in terms of outside of term time. Okay. That would be the first point. That's the point that I'm trying to, from my perspective, trying to mitigate. And I think that the report makes clear that the school is not expecting to sublet the space to anybody, and therefore there won't be any generation of traffic, which is the other point that is covered. So I wouldn't be expecting anybody else to be using that site with the condition on it. So how we need to word it to make that be the case, I'm happy to seek advice. I would understand not letting it to be used by others to be sufficient to cover that, but obviously it's been queried as to whether it is appropriate or not. Councillor Stewart.
So it's to hopefully help us as we go down this latest rabbit hole, because I think the problem is that the community are really concerned about the noise, but the community would also like more facilities that they can potentially use. And there are two different communities that we are potentially concerned about and trying to keep happy, and that's why I think it's quite a difficult thing to be talking about at this stage. My suggestion, therefore, is the idea of saying no commercial letting of the space. In other words, the applicant can't sort of say a mugger lets out at this level, we will let it out at that level, but the applicant could say we've got all these people who'd like to use these facilities, they don't have another facility they can use, we will let it out for free to them, and that may be a balance where the greater good for those people is offsetting the noise for the concerned neighbours, whereas, I'm obviously thinking particularly in holiday time here, whereas if it was a case of just saying you can let it out commercially, then the applicant will be competing against every other sort of school. So potentially taking away the ability to charge a commercial rate, or potentially any of it, might be away from this rabbit hole.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart, for always a helpful suggestion. I would quite strongly challenge that we're in a rabbit hole, because I think that the number of objections and the objections from highways and the objections that have been heard during the meeting.
Highways didn't object.
Highways did object.
They talked about hypothetical.
Highways objected. If you look at paragraph 3.5, highways object to the proposal. That's the basis upon which the condition, or what part of the basis upon which the condition can be added. Nevertheless, do we feel that commercial letting is sufficiently getting to what we wish to cover, or do we wish to just say letting? Councillor Melly.
I mean, we've heard from the applicant that there's other local state schools that use their facilities, and I don't know whether this is the sort of facility that other state schools might want to use, and I don't want to rule out that sort of thing. So is it something where we can delegate to officers in conjunction with chair and vice chair to figure out exactly where this balance is? I don't know, I wouldn't want us to, as a committee, agree something quite restrictive in terms of no outside use, students of this school only, if actually, once it's looked into more and the evidence of what demand there is and what need there is somewhere in the middle. Can the wording be delegated?
I mean, I think if
that's not a condition. That's a deferral to go away and discuss an issue and bring it back. I think.
Yes.
I think a condition needs to be maybe not the wording that will find its way finally into the decision notice, but certainly, getting that way.
Councillor.
Yeah, I think we are straight off, and Councillor was right to a certain point about the tensions. The highways issue is quite simple. They're happy for people who are already on the site to use that because it doesn't generate any additional traffic. They're not happy, or potentially not happy, with people who are not pupils of the school using it due to lack of cycle parking space, lack of car parking space, etc. So any condition that allows that triggers the highways objection, and that may. What you should be talking about is whether it's walking distance only, people who walk to it, etc. Whether it's a commercial let, or whether it's, as people said, 15 members of the community from half a mile away booking it for a birthday party, and everyone driving down to drop their kids off for a birthday party at that particular facility that they may or may not have paid for. It's that issue of how are people getting, who are the people, how are they getting to the site? And Highways' view is there shouldn't be any additional traffic, be that cycle or car traffic driven to the site by this.
Okay, Councillor Burson.
Given that the applicant has said that they don't want to use it for any other means than for their own children in the school, are we going around in circles a bit here, do you think? Because I don't personally think we need to put this clause in. I think they've explained that they use, they give free use of other facilities to other schools and other people. they've said that they don't want to use this in the way that we're making all these convoluted sort of reasons why they can and can't do this, that, and the other, and we're tying ourselves up in knots really here. I think we're just getting a bit carried away, and I don't say that lightly. It's just getting a bit, you know, where we'll still be here at 10 o'clock working this out, and I don't think that I don't think it's for the I don't think it's for the good of this application. They've stated quite clearly what they're going to do. We've put conditions on that we don't want the extra traffic. Could we vote on the fact that we're happy with what we've got?
I had moved to voting, and then we were slightly diverted off into specifics. I will remind you that part of the reason why I was proposing a condition, and I accept everything you've said about the what's been said by the applicant, but it was also noting the intensification of the site and the noise mitigation, and specifically the notion that actually, if you could say to residents, we know that it's going to be an intensification of noise use, which will have a harm on you, but the flip side of that is that there is a defendable, robust position that says there won't be use of it over the summer because it won't be let and it won't be used for intra-school competition, then that is covering not just the highways aspect, but also the harm caused by the noise. That's what I'm trying to get to. Councillor Stewart, very briefly, and then I think I might just take a fairly simple vote on it.
Very briefly, highways did not object. So it says in the report highways object, but on the highways document, there are 3 categories of recommendation: object, not support, or no objection. And they have ticked not support. They have not ticked object, and they do not object. They do talk about hypotheticals like the rabbit hole we're down, but to clarify, I was correct.
Therein speaks the old boy. Councillor Melly.
I mean, what the wording we have from officers that, you know, we need to use in our decision making is highways development control object to the proposal on the grounds that it could be used for inter-school competitive sport, and there aren't currently any conditions or anything preventing it from being used from inter-school competitive sport.
Can I come back? Sorry, because it's really important. Highways do not object. Okay, it is on the portal. The highways, it's that one you need to look at. Basically, they do not object. They literally can tick the box to object, not support, or have no objection. So they haven't objected. So the fact it says in the report, you know, a bit clumsy with the wording that they object, we can't base it on that position because they haven't objected. Simply.
Right. I'm going to draw a line because I think we are going round in circles here. I have proposed adding a condition which restricts inter-school use and restricts letting to external parties. I'm going to add to that I believe that should apply outside of term time. So it's specifically covering that for the letting, and intra-school necessarily would be during term time. Okay, are we clear? So you would restrict intra-school sporting activities permanently throughout the entire time, and you would restrict letting specifically outside of term time, on the understanding that the school will not be wanting to let because they've got all of the use covered already, so they won't have facility to let. Councillor Melly, very quickly, and then I would just like to take a vote on it, and if it falls, it falls.
Seconded.
Seconded. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Councillor Colwick.
I need to say the grounds for doing that would be both consideration of the amenity of the neighbours as discussed, but also concerns as expressed in the report about additional vehicle and cycle parking.
Absolutely. Councillor Stewart?
If you want to go with that, surely you would just ban letting all year round. You wouldn't ban letting out of term time on the basis that you assume the applicant will not be doing it, because it's a very reputable applicant, but you can't have that as a factor. You would just ban lettings all year round, surely.
Fine. I'm happy to do that. I think, yeah. So we're back to where we were half an hour ago. All those in favour of adding that condition, if you could please show now. Okay, and anybody against adding that condition? And any abstentions? So with 2 in favour and, 9 in favour and 2 abstentions and nobody against, that is added as a condition. So I am painfully now at the point of requiring a proposer for the officer recommendation with the 2 additional conditions. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm content to move approval of the recommendation with the conditions as listed and those 2 which have been added this evening.
So just for clarity, that's a condition around netting.
There was some, okay,
Which
sorry.
passed with 3 in favour and everybody else abstaining, and 2 against.
Is that, yeah, okay.
Please give me your legal advice.
Well, I was just you say that somebody is willing to move the recommendation with the addition of those 2 conditions. I suppose if that's seconded, that means then you'll have a vote as to whether people accept those 2 conditions. If not, then I suppose there'll be another motion to approve with one of those conditions removed. I just didn't know how much support there was for the netting condition. And
Chair, can I suggest, assuming it's seconded, that the matter's put to the vote?
Yeah. Can I see a seconder for the proposal? Thank you, Councillor Eyre. I think therefore, and I will just take the advice of Sandra as the senior legal, and I think I would maybe ask members to consider that as advice, that it's proposed and seconded with the 2 additional conditions. There has been some concern about the support for one of those conditions. Were the proposal not to be supported, there would be opportunity to propose with different conditions were members minded to do so. Is that clear? Councillor Stewart.
Just to clarify a particular point, it's my understanding if it's proposed and seconded to approve as per the officer recommendation, that gets tested rather than we go on a journey down all these hypothetical conditions. So should my proposal, which has been seconded, as I understand it, by Councillor Watson before the discussion, has it not? Okay, well, if my proposal is not seconded by anybody, then fine, my proposal will fall.
yes, Councillor Stewart, my understanding is that your proposal that you made some time ago wasn't actually seconded.
Yep. If nobody wants to second it, fine.
Okay. Gareth, would you like to summarise?
If only I could. So the recommendation is that permission be granted. That's for the conditions set out in the report. The 2 additional conditions set out in the update, and then 2 further additional conditions regarding ball netting over the multi-use games area for the prevention of ball strikes and the impact on residential amenity, and then a condition regarding no inter-school matches and no outside letting to any non-St. Peter's school body. And then the term time thing fell away, didn't it? Yeah. And that again is amenity of neighbours and traffic generation.
Okay, so if I could see by show of hands, all those in favour of that proposal. And anybody against that proposal? And any abstentions? Okay, so with 10 in favour, 1 abstention, that is approved subject to those conditions. Thank you all very much for your time this evening. I suggest we all, as members of the committee, just give consideration to, if we are minded to put forward conditions on things when reading reports, it's worth just testing out some form of wording with officers or other members in advance of the meeting, if that's the way in which you are thinking you're minded to go. Thank you all.